So what we're going to talk about is chemical bonds. So that's not this kind of bond, or even this kind of bond. It's more this kind of bond and this kind of bond. You can maybe tell that this one here is, any suggestions? Water, H2O is water. So first thing we have to think about when talking about bonds is compounds. So a compound compounds are formed when atoms of more than one element combine. So in other words, a compound contains atoms of, and can you put the words together to make the end of the sentence? So the full sentence is, a compound contains atoms of more than one element chemically bonded together. So some everyday examples of compounds are water and these are very beautiful, impressive crystals of salt. So water is, let's get rid of that. Use this
is
instead.
that one block of salt? One tiny little dot of salt?
So water is H2O, and it means that one oxygen atom is bonded to two hydrogens, and salt is sodium chloride. If we write that chemically, we would write NaCl, which means that for every sodium there is one chloride. The important thing is that the properties of compounds are very different from the elements that they're made of. So sodium is sodium would burn our hands, chlorine is a toxic gas, but in a compound, sodium chloride is something we can eat, add to our food, quite harmless. Next question, what holds atoms in compounds together? We've just said that water is one oxygen joined to two hydrogens. What holds atoms and compounds together? Okay, so the answer, of course, is chemical bonds. So this is showing an atom of oxygen, 8 protons, 8 electrons, and I think 8 neutrons as well. And what this is trying to show is that there are different electrons have different energy levels. So we have electrons which are at a lower energy level, closer to the nucleus, and electrons which are at a higher energy level, further away from the nucleus. When we're talking about chemical bonds, we're only interested in electrons. We're not interested in protons or neutrons, because chemical bonds form when atoms share or exchange electrons. But the question is, can any electrons be shared or exchanged? And the answer is
yeah.
no. Only the ones which are
Outstanding.
in this outermost energy level. Only the ones at the outermost energy level, not the ones close to the nucleus.
Electrons on the outermost thingy can be shared or exchanged.
That's right. So an important point is that when the atoms are most stable when their energy levels are filled. And when chemicals react to form compounds, their highest energy levels often become full. And this is done by electrons being shared or being transferred. And this leads to two different kinds of chemical bonds. The case where electrons are shared, the chemical bond is called a covalent bond. And in the case where electrons are transferred from one atom to another, the chemical bond which is formed is called an ionic bond. So as I said, covalent bonds are formed by electrons being shared. So just to think about a common covalent compound, water, if we think how many electrons are in the outer energy level in oxygen, and the answer is 6. And how many electrons are in the outer energy level in hydrogen? Hydrogen, remember, only has one electron, a hydrogen atom, so the answer is 1. And what happens when oxygen reacts with hydrogen to form water? Let's take a look at this. The electrons here are shown in blue, and we can see the electrons from oxygen. You can think of this one: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and from hydrogen 1, and another one here. So what is happening is that one electron from hydrogen is being shared between the hydrogen and the oxygen here, and one electron from oxygen is being shared between the hydrogen and oxygen, and the same is happening here. And what this means is that each hydrogen has 2 electrons in its outer energy level, here and here, and the oxygen has, if you count them, 8 electrons in the outer energy level. So what has happened is that one electron of oxygen has been shared here, and another one here, and one electron of hydrogen has been shared here, here, and here. And the lines that I've drawn, the black lines, here and here, are the covalent bonds. The other kind of bond is easier to picture, I think, and it's called an ionic bond. And ionic bonds are formed when electrons are transferred from one atom to another. And when electrons are transferred from one atom to another, we produce ions. So if we think of the example of sodium chloride, chlorine has 7 outermost electrons, sodium has 1. So what do you think happens when sodium chloride is formed from sodium and chlorine? And the answer is shown in this picture here. You can see that usefully the electrons from sodium are shown as crosses, and from chlorine they are shown as dots. And what is happening is that one electron, the outermost electron of sodium, is being transferred to chlorine. So you can see that down here. And what that means is that the sodium in its new outermost level has 8, and chlorine also has 8. Sodium has lost an electron, so it is now positive. It's a positive ion. Chlorine has gained an electron, so it's a negative ion. And positive attracts negative. And that's where the strength of this bond comes from, the attraction between positive and negative ions. And this is called an ionic bond. And just the last thing to say about chemical bonds is that when chemical bonds form, energy is released. And we saw that in class when we exploded the hydrogen to form the covalent compound water. Remember that big explosion of energy that we saw, even from only a little amount of hydrogen. And the other example in class that we saw was burning magnesium, and magnesium oxide, which is produced, is an ionic compound But also, when that was formed, a lot of energy was released in the form of heat and light. So when chemical bonds form, energy is released. And the energy which is released in explosives, for example dynamite, is released as chemical bonds form. And most explosives rely on the bonds between nitrogen atoms being formed, and a lot of energy is released when these bonds are formed.